Now, the issue of cessationism. I want to give a comprehensive statement on this really thorny and divisive issue in the church today. I want to make it very dense as I can. And it may require you to replay this to absorb it, to get everything that I'm saying here. I think it's going to be sufficient to capture our position because it's very simple at its core. I think what we need most today is we need real, deep reflection, not on the church and the various sins and doctrines and problems that exist outside of us that we believe are attacking the church. I believe that we need to reflect more on what is actually attacking us in our faith that we are not aware of and we refuse to confess. We need to confess a certain truth, and we need to go back to that truth and confess it exclusively. We need to stop concerning ourselves and being obsessed with what is really side issues, while the main issue has been left behind a long, long time ago. Let's identify what that main issue is, and let us cast away this majoring in minors that we are so obsessed with and addicted to. You can call this a message for both liberals and conservatives who need to affirm what has really ceased and what has not. Cessationism, in its most common definition, is the claim that certain miraculous gifts of the Spirit, tongues, healings, prophecies, signs, ceased with the close of the apostolic age. Conservatives tend to affirm it. Liberals or charismatics tend to deny it. That surface disagreement, however, conceals a far deeper agreement between the two sides and an even deeper shared mistake. Conservatives affirm cessationism because they fear instability. Charismatics deny it because they fear absence. Both assume that the function of miracles is to supply something missing in the faith: assurance, power, immediacy, validation. Where they differ is only in how that supply is imagined to arrive. Conservatives relocate it into doctrine system and inherited formulation. Charismatics relocate it into experience, affect, and interior immediacy. What neither side is willing to say is that the faith, as God revealed it, already possessed something so overwhelming, so historically grounded, and so epistemically final that no substitute should ever have been sought at all. To see this, the question of miracles must be removed from the narrow post-Reformation debate and traced across the entire movement of Christian history, because Christianity has never stopped affirming miracles. What it has repeatedly done is accept miracles that man can produce and reject the one miracle that man cannot. In the earliest period, from the cross to the death of John, the church existed in a uniquely fragile epistemic condition. The messianic event had occurred, but its meaning had not yet been canonically fixed, publicly stabilized, or historically distributed. The gospel was already massively phenomenal: incarnation, public ministry, crucifixion, resurrection, ascension. But it had not yet been sealed as a closed prophetic object available to later generations. During this period, extraordinary phenomena served a specific function, not to generate faith, but to certify an already catastrophic revelation during its transmission phase. The signs were not the gospel, they were scaffolding around it. Now, once the prophetic witness was complete, once what Moses and the prophets had said would come had demonstrably come, that provisional need ended. Not because God withdrew power, but because the revelation reached sufficiency. The faith was no longer helpless. It no longer required episodic certification. What remained was not less miraculous, but more demanding. A faith grounded entirely in recognition of fulfilled messianic prophecy. This is where the real crisis begins, and it begins early. In the post-apostolic era, Gnostic movements attempted to replace prophetic fulfillment with hidden knowledge, interior illumination, and spiritual hierarchy. The church rightly resisted this, but in doing so, it began to shift the locus of miracle away from public prophetic fulfillment and toward ecclesial mediation. Instead of asking, what has God done in history? The question became, where does God now authorize power? The answer increasingly took sacramental form. The Eucharist did not merely proclaim Christ's once for all work, it became itself a recurring miracle. What had been a finished revelation was quietly transformed into an ongoing mechanism. This pattern intensified in the medieval period. Mysticism flourished. Visions multiplied. Relics bled. Saints performed wonders. None of this was presented as denial of miracles. On the contrary, it was presented as their continuation. Yet notice the inversion. The miracles affirmed were precisely those that required human mediation, human bodies, human institutions, human subjectivity. While the one miracle that required none of these, the once for all fulfillment of messianic prophecy, receded into the background. Christianity still loved miracles, but only miracles that could be managed, repeated, localized, or felt. The Reformation corrected some of this, but not all of it. In rejecting Catholic sacramental miracle claims, Protestants did not fully return to prophetic epistemology. Instead, they replaced sacramental mediation with conceptual mediation. The miracle was no longer the Eucharist, it was the gospel as an abstract system of propositions. Faith no longer required recognition of fulfilled prophecy so much as assent to theological formulation. Conservatives rightly rejected charismatic excess, but in doing so, they quietly canonized a conceptual gospel that Scripture itself never identifies as revelatory. They ceased not only tongues and healings, but the very idea that faith must be grounded in a publicly verifiable divine act. Charismatics repeat the older error in a different register. They reject conceptualism, but replace it with affect. The Spirit becomes the guarantor not of prophetic truth, but of emotional intensity. Experience substitutes for revelation. Once again, miracles abound, but they are always miracles that occur within the human subject: sensations, impressions, impulses, feelings. The prophets are unnecessary because immediacy feels more convincing than history. Now, this is why the modern debate is so confused. Conservatives are right to deny modern miracle claims that have no biblical function or warrant. Charismatics are right to sense that a purely conceptual faith is dead. But both are wrong in the same way. Both have abandoned the only miracle Scripture ever presents as saving. That miracle is not tongues, not healings, not sacraments, not doctrine, not emotion. It is the public, irreversible fulfillment of messianic prophecy in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. That miracle does not repeat because it cannot repeat. It does not fade because history only sharpens it. And it does not require supplementation because it was never provisional to begin with. What ceased was not divine action. What ceased was the church's need for help once God had spoken finally and decisively in history. What should have increased year by year, generation by generation, was not fascination with a new phenomenon, but confrontation with an old one. The prophets were right, and Jesus is the only one they spoke of. Christianity has never stopped affirming miracles. It has simply grown increasingly uncomfortable with the only one that leaves no room for human manufacture.